Okay, so this is part two economic growth. But first of all, I just want to do the previous piece of work, which is all about trade-offs, and then with the old Phillips curve. Remember inflation and unemployment, which said there was an inverse correlation between the two, and then we moved to the long-run Phillips curve, which was the monetarist idea, which was that the Phillips curve was now straight. So therefore, what you had to do was try and reduce the natural rate of unemployment. And then we got the monetarist neoclassical free market idea that you're faced with an LRAS curve. So if you just increase AD, that will always lead to higher inflation. We also looked at the causes of unemployment. There are about 6 or 7 of those. And in particular, an important one is called real wage unemployment. This is when the wage or the minimum wage is set above the equilibrium price. And this will mean that there will be more unemployment within the economy. The problems of inflation. We become internationally uncompetitive, reduction in demand, higher interest rates, problems of deflation. Well, there are 2 types of inflation. There's malign inflation and benign inflation, or good inflation and bad deflation. And the fact that if prices start falling, then people will then stop spending money. And the fact that if we have deflation, that even if interest rates are zero, they won't be able to stimulate the economy. And then the problems of unemployment, the private costs and the social cost, the cost of the government, but also stress, depression, all those sorts of things. And lastly, we looked at MV equals PT, and we looked at this diagram on here. So we started off with that. Now I'm just going to rip this off the page. There's a reason behind that, which I won't bother to explain. And then we come on to the idea of economic growth, which is what part 2 is all about. And also, just a quick summary there is that we can avoid the conflict between inflation and unemployment, or growth and inflation, as long as we have really good supply side, whether it's neoclassical or we use supply side on a Keynesian model. There are loads of other conflicts within the economy, economic growth, which will hurt the environment. If we have economic growth, there's a tendency that we will get more inequality, reducing government debt. But at the same time, that may also increase inequality, because then we're talking about reducing welfare payments or whatever. Growth, if you have growth and the balance of payments get worse because we'll import more goods, growth and inflation and the balance of payments. However, if you have supply side, then hopefully everything will be okay. Okay, next one on here is the benefits of growth, as I just put this up here. Right, the benefits of growth. Benefits of growth are higher incomes, the multiple accelerator will take off, we'll have more money for green investment, we'll have more money for public and merit goods, money can be spent on the environment, improve public services, research and development, economic development, more choice for the consumer, and a decline in absolute poverty. Now, this is what Liz Truss went on about. Remember her famous speech, growth, 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 we should have a bigger cake. But she used the free market model to try and create growth. But these are the advantages of growth which we have in the UK economy. If you want to evaluate growth, growth is really important, because particularly in less developed countries, because more growth will actually move people out of poverty. But there is a problem of economic growth, because we will have more pollution, and this will hit the environment. And who's going to get the growth? Is it going to be the rich people who are just going to get richer? There's going to be greater levels of inequality, or are we going to spread it about? And there's also the diminishing marginal utility of growth. That we have more and more growth, for some people they get richer and richer and richer. Is it worth it? Does it actually make the money happen in the first place? And then we have this diagram on here. We have a negative and a positive output gap and everything else. So hopefully you can draw all of those diagrams from there. There is no conflict with supply side economics. Okay, so within the pack, there's an essay in there, which is there is no conflict with supply side economics. You can talk about what is supply side economics. It's either the free market or it's interventionist. So paragraph 1, I'd probably write about free market, labour market flexibility, low welfare payments, 0 hour income tax, 0 hour contracts, reducing income tax. Paragraph 2, I will talk about low corporation tax, why that is so good for the economy. However, will it lead to will it lead to a rise in national debt, or will it conform to the Laffer curve? Whereas if we have the Laffer curve, we'll actually get more money back. Paragraph 3 talk about interventionist supply side. In particular, if you had a green revolution, then that would reduce the price of energy. And in the conclusion, we'd have labour market flexibility, which could create inequality. And with Munchausen, there are no conflict between objectives. We can also talk about a demand side shock and a supply side shock. A demand side shock is where there's a fall in demand, and at that time, right, you would want to increase demand in the economy, so you wouldn't be using supply side economics, you would be using fiscal and monetary policy. Okay, there's some interesting articles on here and within the pack, and basically it's about a consumption-led economy or an export-led economy. So in the UK, obviously, we have a consumption-led economy, which makes our economy far weaker, and we're probably starting to pay the price of that. 400% our private debt in the UK is 400% of GDP. Or we could go for export-led growth. Now, there's lots of countries like Germany and China who've gone for export-led growth. The problem is, it's impossible for every country in the world to have export-led growth, because if we have export-led growth, then other countries have to import more goods. And then we go on to the idea, well, did we get it right during austerity? And it looks now that we probably didn't, because that was a time when the UK could borrow money really, really cheaply, and it could invest it in the economy, invest in the National Health Service, and we may have avoided the current crisis that we now have. Kwasi Kwarteng goes along and quite rightly says that what he tried to do with the UK economy, Kwasi Kwarteng Liz Truss, was to stimulate the UK economy because it was stagnating and there was anemic growth. Hence the idea we want growth, because growth is really good for all the factors we just outlined previously. Probably in 2010 we really missed a bit of a trick, because we should have been investing in the UK economy. And in 2023 we need to be looking at a lot of structural reform. The next part of the handout talks about the circular flow of income, households, firms. This is what it is. Households offer labour, in return they get incomes, they then spend the money, and in return they get goods. But out of this model, we have the external factors on here. So we have savings, taxes and imports. This is all money going out of the economy, and coming into the economy is investment, government spending and exports. And if injections are greater than withdrawals, then we will see a movement from one equilibrium position to another position within the economy on there. Now, obviously within the UK, because we always have a trade deficit, our imports are always greater than our exports, and then this will lead to a fall in AD. So somehow we have to make that up. So we have to make that up either through more government spending, which means we have to borrow money, or alternatively, we have to try and attract foreign direct investment from abroad, or the consumers have to spend more money, but then they may get into personal debt. And as I just said, consumer debt is 400% of GDP. So this is a circular flow of income, and then we have the expenditure, output and income model, which are different ways in which we can measure the level of national income within the UK economy. And we are in equilibrium when W is equal to J. Okay, so the next one on here is looking at aggregate demand is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Okay, now this is really just common sense on this bit. This is quite a big chunk of the syllabus though. What factors will affect consumption? You just remember these from the top of your head. Things like, are people confident? Is there a cost of living crisis? Are people's real incomes going up? Are interest rates low? Is their wealth going up? Are house prices going up? All these factors will make people spend more money, and we can think of the factors that affect investment and government spending and exports and imports. Right, but there's a little sheet on the handout within that. Now, there was an essay which said, well, what factors will influence consumption? Pretty easy, I've just outlined them. The second part of the essay, what happens if there's a fall in savings? Well, if there's a fall in savings, that basically means that consumption will go up. And what happens to an economy if consumption goes up? Well, we might get demand pull inflation, we might get a trade deficit, we might get lots of personal debt, we might even stimulate more investment because there's more demand in the economy. So it looks like a hard essay, but really it's actually fairly straightforward. Right, and then we look at the concepts of crowding in and crowding out. Crowding in, you all know, if the government stimulates demand, we have more demand in the economy, so there's more demand, therefore firms invest more money, and because there's more demand, there's more cash going into the banks. So this was the crowding in theory. Prior to that, we've also had the crowding out theory, which, as you know, I'm not a particularly big fan of, but you need to know the logic of how the crowding out theory works. All the people at the Bank of England will know what the crowding out theory is. So we're going to move on to the perfect paragraph on there. Good. So then we have the crowding out effect on here. So this is when we increase we increase government spending, so therefore the government to sell more bonds. Who buys those bonds? We do, the consumer buys the bonds, but by buying the bonds, we're not putting our money into shares, or we're not putting our money into the banks. Now, if we do not put our money into those things, then there's going to be less money available for the private sector. On top of that, of course, when the government spends its money, maybe the government isn't particularly good at spending money, and so we're taking money away from the private sector, and we've got the more inefficient government sector spending our money, and this is a surefire way to destroy the economy. Right, this is why the Conservative Party do not like the idea of crowding out, and do not like the idea of the government spending too much money, because that will naturally make us even more inefficient. Then we move on to the determinants of long-run aggregate supply, which is technology, productivity, attitudes, enterprise, factor mobility, how quickly labour and capital can move around the country, economic incentives, so good economic incentives are going to be more enterprise, and the role of the banking system. The banks actually lend out to real businesses on here. Right, so these things here will affect the long-run aggregate supply curve. And a lot of what I talk about is if the government invested loads of money into technology, particularly green technology, then the long-run aggregate supply curve would shift out. But we also have the monetarist view, which is the free market view, which you now know. We also have the industrial policy view, which is the Mariana Mazzucato view, which is that we should be investing lots of money, and that should be government-led, and the government with the private sector should create new markets, and then money will flood into those areas. Or we can have consumption-led growth. I've already spoken about that in this session, where if consumer spending goes up, is this good or bad for the economy? And also the environment also has an impact on all of these things here. Okay, uses of national income data. How good is national income data? Now, most people will consider that real GDP is a bit of a raw indicator in terms of what goes on in the economy. Right, for example, the purchasing power parity theory. So in the UK, the average income is $30,000. In Namibia, it's 30,000 quid. In Namibia, it's 2,000 quid. But actually, they can buy much more for their pound notes. So really, we're not really 15 times richer than the Namibians. It's really the case that maybe we are 5 times as richer, because their money will buy much more than what we have. You also have some economic activity is not measured, e.g. subsistence farming in Namibia again. Lots of people grow their own food. This isn't included in the figures because it's not traded. Number of hours worked. We tend to work pretty long hours within the UK. There's lots of poverty in the UK. 20% of people in the UK experience absolute poverty, which means they don't have enough money to get by. And then we have the intangibles. Is it a really good free country? Would you want to live in Qatar if we are gay, for example? No, we wouldn't, because that is outlawed by the government. The literacy levels and also living standards. Okay, living standards is a much broader concept. Do people like living in your country? Is there lots of freedom? Do you have the freedom to express yourself? So we've got to take all of these different ideas into account on here. Next one on here, as I've done this, sorry, I've made a big mistake on here, which is, there we go. We then have the Human Development Index on here, which is, we can have a Human Development Index is long, healthy life, life expectancy, knowledge, and also our incomes, okay? So this is a broader measure than real GDP per capita. We can also use the Index of Sustainable Economic Welfare, which basically says, okay, we've had real rises in real GDP per capita within the USA, but actually if you look at the Index of Sustainable Economic Welfare, because of the damage to the environment, actually the Americans have actually become poorer, or maybe because there's a rise in inequality, there's a rise in crime. So this measure is a much broader measure than the Human Development Index. And finally, on this talk, we have the Happy Planet Index. which is not on the syllabus, but it did come up on the papers once. The Happy Planet Index is a more extreme version than economic growth, obviously, than the Human Development Index, and also the Index of Sustainable Economic Welfare. Now, this one is well-being times life expectancy divided by ecological footprint. The number one country in the world happens to be Costa Rica, because they are 99% renewable, so obviously the ecological footprint, and they seem to be pretty happy as well, and they have a long life. So therefore they fulfill all of that criteria. Now, when Nick Marks came out with this, who's quite a good friend of mine, he came out with this. That Happy Planet Index was downloaded over 1 million times within 24 hours. He's also given a TED talk on this as well. So the HDI is on the syllabus. You need to know that. The Index of Sustainable Economic Welfare is a much broader term. And then finally, we finish with the Happy Planet Index. Okay, thank you.